Tighten your lines as we get ready to sail the seven seas on the Political Pirate Podcast. Join Captain Ted Yoho and the salty dog John Martin as they search far and wide for the greatest treasure of all, the truth. From local Florida news to nationwide stories and the globe beyond, we've got it all mapped out. Now here's your hosts, the salty dog John Martin and Captain Ted Yoho.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the 3Ps, the Political Pirate Podcast, with yours truly, the old salty dog John Martin as your host, and the captain of our pirate ship back, I believe, in Welacca, Florida now, Captain Ted Yoho. How the heck are you, Ted?
I'm doing great, man. I am in the metropolis of Welacca after coming back from Washington, D.C. on Thursday and Friday, where we did the show from. So good afternoon, everybody.
How was life in the swamp?
Well, it's still there, buddy. It's hot and humid there. Everybody's complaining about it. And I said, heck, this is normal for us. They were in, I don't want to say, they're out of session. I'll say that. That word recess, when people said we were on recess, man, we worked harder when we were down here, doing a lot of events, seeing constituent businesses. So they're out of session and it was quiet.
Well, you know,
so we got some work done.
It's kind of funny, Ted, but people are talk about like AI. They talk about the cell phones, various things that have, potentially been doomed to the country and that kind of thing. But, one thing nobody ever talks about, but you could make a case that the thing that is destroying America or that really turned America in a bad way was air conditioning. Because, and I mean, I'm joking, but I'm serious at the same time. Because DC, you mentioned how hot it was. DC was basically a real swamp and was miserable during the summer. And the legislature back in the day only met about once every other year, and only when it was called up. Because one of the reasons was D.C. was such a miserable place to be. And of course, the South, like Florida, we're being overrun. But Florida, until we had air conditioning, was basically a frontier. So you could make a case that Florida, air conditioning is what destroyed America.
One of those inventions that are both a blessing and a curse. Florida wouldn't be here without AC the way it is today.
Yeah,
and you go back to DC in the early days, they would leave and flee from there because during the summer, the hot months and with a lot of rain, the mosquitoes, you had malaria and yellow fever. And so they were endemic up there and, almost a pandemic level. A lot of people died from those things, those diseases.
Now they flee for different reasons and I'm saying this for Republicans and Democrats, and the Democrats won't be any different if, Lord help us in this sense, if they get power, is they also flee because they don't want to do a darn thing. They don't do any work.
Yeah, they want to go out and campaign and go out and raise some money. You're right, they don't. And, it's just a whole different culture up there.
Absolutely. Well, somebody who does do a lot of work is a guy named Freddie. Call Freddie. He's basically the power behind this show, and you'll see the little moniker pop up on the screen. We need you to make that call, become part of our team, help us keep rowing this pirate ship, sailing it forward. Make that call Freddie. And with that, Ted, I want to tell you, because I'm here at Spurrier's Gridiron Grill, and we'll hear an advertisement from the old ball coach soon. But tonight is a very special night here. I think you had to buy tickets in advance. There may still be some, but they're celebrating the 5-year anniversary of Spurrier's Gridiron Grill tonight. Congratulations to the old ball coach, everybody involved in it. And of course, Mr. Freddie Wiebe is right in the middle of all of that.
He sure is. And Freddie does so much for the community and for us. And, people that know Freddie, they just know what a quiet guy he is, very humble and very business minded. And he gets things done. I don't want to call him a community organizer, but he organizes and gets a lot of results for just great causes. So we thank you, Freddie. And I want to congratulate Spurrier's Gridiron Grill, because if usually there's that 5-year window for a restaurant to make it, and if they've made that, they've done very well. So And it's easy to understand why they made it. The food's good, the help's good, and they've got the Florida memorabilia there.
And football season is about 2 weeks away from
Ooh,
college.
2 weeks away. This will
Well,
be the year of the Gator with our new coach, Summerall.
Ted, we're not going to get too deep into it, but since we covered it on Friday, I want to just mention the fact that Luigi Mangione, the murderer of the United Healthcare CEO, pled guilty on federal charges in New York City. We kind of predicted that on our show Friday, and it now
We sure
will
did.
move to a state court where he could be charged. Well, he is charged with murder. It's about the double jeopardy thing and all of that. It's kind of interesting that he pled that way, but now it would seem like he's unlikely to be actually convicted of murder. What are your thoughts on any of that right now?
You know, our legal system is so skewed, seems sometimes, to protect the guilty and not the innocent or the victim. I'm glad he pleaded guilty. And I'm sure there are some negotiations in there so he doesn't get the death penalty. Not that New York does that. Um, and the state charges, we'll see how that pans out here. He did that because they got rid of the terrorism charges in the state of New York. I believe it might have been the federal side. They got rid of the terrorism charge. And so he's being charged, yes, for the murder, but there's one was conspiracy to commit murder, and the other one was, just act of violence like that. And so we'll see how that plays out. The biggest thing is he's pleaded guilty. The disturbing thing, and you brought it up last week, and I know we weren't going to talk a lot about this, was the support group around him, edifying him, making a hero out of a guy that is a common thug. And I believe in Norman Schwarzkopf's philosophy. He didn't put judgment on people. He said that's God's job. He just arranged the meeting.
Well, I will make a prediction. If he goes to prison, which he obviously will most likely, I can't see any scenario where he won't, and he's probably going to be in there for life. If he thinks he has some fans with his pretty boy looks on the street right now, he's going to have plenty of people fandom in prison there. It might be a little different than he imagines, though.
Yeah, they probably already got a lottery board up to see who gets them first.
Yeah, I hear you.
Good luck.
Well, absolutely. Ted, we talk off and on, just it seems like almost on a daily basis, or our show is every Monday and Friday now at noontime. So check us out live or watch us on demand anytime. But Iran is now threatening to escalate the war. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but Iran is becoming a political problem for Trump at exactly the wrong time, and that is leading into the midterms. There's one thing about it, I don't think anybody can dispute this. If it's going to affect the midterms, it's, in my opinion, it's already baked in. So I don't think anything, unless they just totally surrendered, which they're not going to do, is going to change how this impacts the midterms. I'm not saying, Ted, and I'll turn it back to you in a second, I'm not saying that it's going to be all that the midterms are about, but whatever impact they're going to have is already baked in, I believe.
Yeah, and they're going to play this out. There's a great article in the Wall Street Journal today about Iran, how they're not going to give up. They're going to continue this, and that their plan the whole time was to extend this to the midterms, to weaken Trump, high gas prices, and to rearm their proxy groups, the Houthis, Hamas, and just to keep where they can keep control of the Straits of Hormuz, which obviously is going to keep up the price of gas. So they're playing this very strategically, and they're a country of I think 93 million people, and the Revolutionary Guard, Iranian IRGC, is their Revolutionary Guard. They're the one they have turned power over to, and Khomeini's son is calling the shot supposedly, but we don't even know if he's alive. But their whole goal is to arm these proxies and to increase the fighting because they think this is just a pause for America to come in there a lot harder. And there is no intention of bringing this to an end on their side.
Yeah, well, Ted, I've thought about this a lot over the weekend about what he should or shouldn't have done and all of that kind of stuff. I think the biggest problem is really, and people need to hear me out on this, is our military, as great as it is not designed to manage stuff. That's not what they're good at. They're good at at kill and destroy, crush, kill, and destroy, like the robot and I'm not knocking them for that. I applaud them for that. But if you think back on it, and I'm not blaming the military because they're hamstrung by politicians, but we've been extremely successful really since the formation of our military at military action. But when it comes to managing the situation, which is basically what they're being used for now, I can't think of a single time where long term we've been successful at that.
We haven't. I mean, John, this is just a bad movie being replayed over and over again. Our military is great. I mean, they do what they're supposed to do. They've trained for that. These young men and women, even the older people that are out there, in all branches of our military, including the Coast Guard, they're highly skilled professionals. And what they rely on is steady leadership with an agenda of keeping this country secure. I've talked critically of President Trump, and I'm going to start this just saying I don't know near what they knew before they went into Iran, how close they were to a nuclear bomb if it was pointed at us. So I'll give them a pause on that. But from the outside looking in, as somebody that's been up in Washington, doesn't seem to be a well thought out strategy. The oil situation of how it's just collapsed the world market, or it's doing that, should have been thought well ahead before we went in there, and we should have had oil in reserves going to all of our allied nations. Just so we're going to have to see how this works out. What I do know is they're gearing up to continue a fight, they being Iran, and that we're going to have to deal with that. And they're predicting that we're going to go in there hard, that this is just the beginning of the war and it's going to escalate a lot harder.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to determine any of that. President Trump, I don't disagree with you, but I think it's difficult to predict. I will predict this, that Iran is not going to surrender absent. It's kill or be killed for them. I've kind of covered that.
It really is, John.
Shows.
I mean, it is. Surrender is not an option to them until you get rid of enough of the bad people. And then the Iranian people need to rise up at this point in time. And it's going to be hard because there'll be a lot of deaths in there. But they have to come to the table. Freedom is not free. You can't give people freedom. They've got to fight for it. And we've got to fight to maintain our freedom in this country.
Yeah, I'm reading from an article here that makes some points. I just kind of want to go over them. I don't necessarily agree 100% with them, but I think they're interesting. So it says here that Trump's refusing to show a political off-ramp. He says Iran cannot be allowed to obtain nuclear weapons. I 100% agree with that, and warns that an Iranian escalation would bring an overwhelming U.S. response. Now, seems to be saying that on a daily to weekly basis. At some point, and we're going to talk more about this after the break, but at some point it loses credibility.
Oh, it's lost credibility. It's kind of like his negotiation with Putin. He berates Zelensky on the world stage. It empowers Putin. It empowers Xi Jinping. It empowers Iran. All of our adversaries are empowered. And, then he pulls out of NATO, or not pulls out, but he berates NATO. So we have driven a wedge. Like I said, I came back and I was speaking to an ambassador from another country. He represents that country here. And he was saying that the word around the world is you can't trust America, that they are making alliances. In fact, a lot of the countries that are in the UN are putting up field offices in Switzerland, Sweden, away from America because they want to get away from the American influence and the cost of doing business here. So, these are all things that foreign policy directs. Good foreign policy keeps our country strong. We have good trade policies. Things stay stable. and you have certainty, not just in this country, but it's projected around the world. We have lost that. We have lost it under the first Trump administration was kind of the rumbling, and then Biden was a disaster, and then Trump too has just come out and alienated a lot of people. And this is a big world, and we're only 4% of the population. So we need to. I don't need to be the best friend of everybody, but we can be a friend of all nations that want to be friends of us. And this is where our foreign policy should take us.
Well, one thing that Trump is saying over and over is that the war is going well, particularly regarding the Strait of Hormuz. Now, it depends on how you look at that. Are we controlling the Strait of Hormuz in a sense that we're allowing who can come and go in that? Absolutely. We have pretty much an ironclad lock on it. Not much is getting in and out of Iran. But the reality is, as far as ship trafficking through there was like 130 to 150 ships a day going through the Strait of Hormuz before the war started on a regular basis. Now there are days when fewer than double digits go, and I think yesterday none went through there, or the day before. So that, if you look at it as a trade area, it is totally shut down, Ted. So that is a legitimate criticism of the president that I'm hearing more and more, is that before you went in there, the straits were open and nothing was really happening. That's probably an overstatement, but there is some credibility to that statement.
Oh, no doubt. So you asked, have we lost credibility? Yeah, I mean, we've lost credibility all over, and it goes not just the Straits of Hormuz, because we annihilated their military, their air force, their navy, but yet they still control it. And we can say no, we control it because we control who goes in and out of that. But yet, if it's real limited, like you brought up, we went from triple digits of ships going in and out of that straight down to single zero to single digits, or maybe low double digits. Who really controls it? We don't control it. It's a quagmire is what it is. And it comes down to, I've got bigger hands than you, or, it's just one of those kind of silly games that goes back and forth. And this is not a game. This is world politics. And this is national security politics. We need to get this right. I wish the president and his team the best for a quick resolve to this. But I think, like you, John, that you were saying, I don't know how you get out of this. When you have a radical faction that's ideological, hell bent on destroying America, and we've made that worse because there's that many more people radicalized to do that. There's going to have to be complete surrender from them for this to come to a peaceful conclusion. And we're seeing other nations separated from us too. And I know you're going to talk about Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Turkey in that alliance. When you see them pivoting away from leadership from us, I mean, that's a sign that they can't trust us. And that goes back to what that ambassador was telling us when I was up in D.C., how people are moving away from America's leaders in the world, as the de facto strong arm, or the strongest leader in the free world. And, that's going to change, the dynamics in America for years, if not decades to come. I don't know if we'll ever get it back.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's tough, but to me, the only thing I can really compare it to in recent history, within the last 100 years, basically, is the end of World War II, when you had, and I'm not saying they're exact comparisons, but when you had the Nazis in charge of Germany, when you had the people of Japan with the feeling they had about the emperor, and all, the only way they would ever surrender was literally total annihilation. Germany, we had to take them to the nothing, and Japan would not have surrendered until here the emperor actually surrendered after we dropped 2 nuclear bombs on them. Now, they're different belief systems, but the reality is the same. And I think Iran, as far as the Republican Guard, they will never actually surrender unless they're totally obliterated. That's just, I hate to say it, but that's the way I see it.
Well, I think you're right. I'm sure there's a faction in the Iranian Guard that they're there and they're fighting strong, because if not, they'll be eliminated. They'll be executed. And I think that's true with a lot of the militaries around the world. And but I think you're right. I know you're right. It's got to be complete surrender or no surrender at all. And our side's the same way. We're not going to just walk away from this with our tail tucked in between our leg. Um, but we're in a tough situation now, and credibility is losing. We're losing credibility, and time is running out. The midterm is going to be a big factor. If Trump maintains any majority in the House, it'll be slim, and same in the Senate. If he loses those majorities, game is over. This war will come. It'll be stalemated for the next 2 years until a new president comes in.
Yeah. Well, recent
And that's
polling
not a healthy thing because Iran will rebuild.
Recent polling says that basically, and I've seen various versions of it, but it's all a majority. 2/3 of Americans oppose the U.S. military campaign, and many don't believe Trump has clearly explained its objectives. I'm hearing that same thing from people that I know are Trump supporters. I hear people talking about that on the boat, and that's kind of a hodgepodge. They're mostly conservative people, but they're people from all different walks of life. What are you hearing from everyday average Americans, Ted, about what they feel about President Trump, the campaign in Iran and all? Because my back in the napkin polling is that Americans are opposed to it, and they are questioning, and they don't really think that the president's given an explanation.
No, I think the same as you. I mean, I talk to people all over the country, and I've got the access to DC. I'm hearing the same thing. There's not a clear strategy. They're not favoring it, and they want to get out of it as quick as they can. This is probably the biggest foreign affairs blunder I've seen, other than us going into Iraq. I didn't think we needed to go into Iraq. Um, so, are we keeping evil? And it depends on what side of the coin on and who's calling who evil. Are we keeping evil in check? Or are we taking eyes off of those things that we really need to be focusing on? And I'm going to go back to the existential threats: our debt, China, um, energy, a strategy for energy independence and security. And then you look at immigration without assimilation. These are things that we need to look at. And you got to look at who's fomenting the dissent in America. You've got 20 some $billion have been invested into our country by Middle Eastern countries, mainly Oman and Qatar. They have put $20 billion in here in our university system. So that changes what they teach in a university. So you see this rise of Muslim and Muslification in America. Then you look at what China is doing with their Confucius institutes that have been pretty much run out, but the ideology has stayed there. We went from having 267,000 students to over 600,000 students. And that's going to have an influence because they have put in billions of dollars in our education. So the education leanings go more to Islamic teachings and Chinese teachings. And so that's going to affect the very basic of America and public opinion. And that's what's going on here. And China, when you look at Russia, Russia likes to use a hammer and bring people under control with hammer weapons and things like that and throw them out of the windows. China plays the long game. They just do steady infiltrations, and they use their 1,000 talents program. And a perfect example is that Harvard professor Charles Lieber, Dr. Charles Lieber, who was in charge of their biological and chemistry departments. Well, he was on the 1,000 Talents program, signed a contract, got paid millions of dollars, and he was doing gain of function research in China at the Wuhan lab during that same period that the coronavirus or COVID had become a weaponized virus. So, I mean, this stuff is going on, John. And so, are we really focusing on that as a nation? Are we tied up in the Epstein files and the UFOs and, another war in the Middle East? So, we need politicians that are going to go in there and focus on what really matters in this country to bring this country around and make it strong again. I'll turn it back over to you.
Well, there's another development come out, which is no big surprise. But this guy's name he's the commander in chief of the Iranian army. and
Right.
he's come out. His name is Amir Hatami. Hatami, I think is how you say it. But he's
You
offered
did that pretty good.
not too many Hatamis in Hawthorne just yet. But he is offered a $30,000 reward for captured or killed United States service members. He's announced that, and no big surprise that they would do something like that, but it kind of shows you it's pretty hard to negotiate with someone who is coming out and offering that kind of money. And what really concerns me, not so much Iran itself, because they're going to do whatever they can, but these splinter groups are just, lone wolves trying to seek attention and attack soldiers even in this country like they've done in the past. That concerns me.
Well, that's exactly what's going to happen. They're happy to kill Americans for free. Now you give them a $30,000 incentive, which will make them triple their income over there. And like you said, it's not just here, over there in Iraq or Iran or any of the Middle East countries where we have bases. It's all over the world and here. In fact, we saw that Iranian dissident killed those guards, the National Guard up in Washington, D.C. I mean, he shot two of them, killed one of them. So, this goes back to Palestine and Israel. Palestine has a program where if you kill an Israeli, your family, and you get killed yourself, your family gets a stipend. If you go to prison, they get a stipend. You get paid while you're in prison for killing a Jew or maiming a Jew. And it's a sick society, and this is what they're doing here. It's just going to escalate. It's going to be a bad situation. And if that starts happening here, you're going to see, my prediction is you'll see a very strong action in Iran that they don't want to have. And I don't think it leaves us any other choice.
I hear you. Well, we're going to take a quick commercial break. Before we do, let me just tell you, make that call. Call Freddie, join our team here, help us to educate, motivate, and activate people. Make that call. We're going to take a break. Take us to break, Ted.
Yeah, we appreciate everybody watching, and please pass our message out far and wide. And we want to thank our sponsor, Archer Automotive and Transmission Repair, a family-owned and operated full-service auto repair for over 20 years. They're open from 7:30 in the morning till 5:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. Call for an appointment, 352-495-2485. We'll see you after the break.
Hi there, this is Coach Steve Spurrier, and I want to let you know that by popular demand, Spurrier's Gridiron Grill's delicious brunch is now served in a premium buffet. You have spoken, we have listened, and we're now serving Gainesville's only elevated buffet, complete with an omelet station, ginger sage chicken sausage, shredded short rib, plus you can enjoy bottomless mimosas and Bloody Marys. So join us every Saturday and Sunday from 11 to 3 for the best brunch in town.
Well, there you saw the old ball coach, Steve Spurrier, the principal owner of Spurrier's Gridiron Grill. And as I said at the top of the show, they're celebrating tonight their 5-year anniversary. I'm not sure if tickets are still available. Contact them and you can find out. But congratulations to the old ball coach and everybody involved in it. Happy birthday, in this case, 5-year anniversary birthday. Come check it out.
Absolutely. Happy birthday.
Yeah, well, we've been talking a little about this at the beginning of the show, but I want to delve into it a little bit more. And I created this headline. I think it's pretty accurate. And I asked the question, has President Trump / America lost credibility? And what really bring this up, this got very little news coverage, but it's about a week-old story. But Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Pakistan signed a joint security agreement, basically kind of like NATO, that if one is attacked, all are attacked. Ted, I know you stay up on foreign policy, but this got very little coverage, but I think it is an extremely big deal. What's your thoughts on it?
No, this is a real big deal. And, I advocated for a security agreement between nations similar to that, like they just did here, but also the ASEAN bloc of nations, which is 10 nations in the South China or East Sea area of the Pacific. But this could be a really good thing or it could be a bad thing, because you got Saudi Arabia's got 29 million people, Turkey's got about 89 million, and I think Pakistan's got 250 million people. So you've got a large body of people, and Turkey has the second or third largest army in the region, or in the world, the way I understand it. No, they're, I think, fifth, but in that pack there, they're the second largest army, and so it is a very significant one. The interesting thing is you don't see the USA in there. They don't want us in there, and sometimes that may be a better thing, because they can negotiate a Muslim nation to a Muslim nation to a Muslim nation, and I think that it would be the better way, and let them negotiate this peace over there. And if that happens, this is a great thing, John. If this is something that consolidates power, especially with Pakistan being the only Muslim country over there that has a nuclear weapon that we know about, it could be a bad thing. It just depends on how our relationships, and it goes back to foreign policy again. If we've got good foreign policy and we focus on an open trade with all nations, this will be a good thing, because they're going to worry about keeping themselves safe, and they've got a conflict with China, so that's a good thing, because they're not real friendly with China.
Well, I think you bring up an interesting point, because I think it'd be an overread to say that they no longer want any kind of alliance with America. It's not anti-America. I don't take that from it, although I can see how people would. I think it's more of they don't want to be totally reliant on the United States of
Exactly.
America, because they're seeing with President Trump somewhat of a waffling in some sense. And of course, back when Biden was in there, you can't, they're not going to do anything. So I think they're looking at America as not a reliable supporter in the sense of military having their back, because what if they don't show up? What if our obligations are to show up and we don't? And the West in general has given this message, because quite frankly, NATO has not shown up for us. So I don't blame them for looking at the West, and America is still the leader of the West, as not being totally reliable. So I agree, it'd be an overstatement to think that they're moving like towards China. So it could be a very good thing, but it is a tricky thing.
Well, it is, and time will tell. And this is where we've got to get our act together. I mean, the world knows we're $39 trillion in debt and growing exponentially further in debt. How long can that go on? How long will other nations give us credit and keep our dollar afloat and give it value before they say we can't count on this? And this is what you're seeing with NATO. NATO is something that Trump made stronger, and Trump won, but then he made it weaker by our alliances and connectivity with those countries, because of his browbeating them. And there was reason for that. But it could have been handled diplomatically a lot better and made that whole NATO bloc stronger. Had we done that, we wouldn't have to worry, or those countries over there that border Russia wouldn't have to worry about Russia going into there. We're hearing talks now that Russia is going to go in there. That's what those drones have been going into Poland and Romania. And Russia says, oh, they were off course. No, they're not. They're very precision. They're all AI operated or human operated. So they went in there on purpose to test the water. And the idea is that they're going to go in, Russia's going to go into these countries and start invading. So then you've got the beginning of World War III. You've got China shipping military planes full of who knows what. It has to be military equipment, would be my guess, into Iran. So it's going to boost Iran up as far as their abilities, and they'll have the state of the art equipment. So things are shaking out that are not very good. If this pact, the Mecca Accord with Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Pakistan holds, and they stay together as a bloc, and we can come back, maybe not this administration, but the next, and recreate NATO of what it was supposed to stand for and make it a powerful bloc, the world will be a safer place. But until then, we're all in jeopardy, is what my feeling is.
Well, Saudi Arabia is kind of interesting. I mean, you mentioned that Pakistan obviously has that we know of the nuclear capability of the Muslim world, the only one. they also have a long history of being basically at combat to a certain extent because they've had routine skirmishes with India since the beginning of their nation. Afghanistan is not the most stable. They have issues with China and stuff like that. So militarily, they're kind of used to fighting. And Turkey is hard to totally figure. They obviously have a strong military. They have a mixed bag of using it. But what makes Saudi Arabia so interesting is that they're clearly loaded. I mean, they have billions and trillions of dollars. But their military has been somewhat of a paper tiger. And people sometimes forget this. The royal family that controls Saudi Arabia, they have an iron grip to a point, but it's also very tenuous all the time. I mean, they could not take an uprising of their people probably much more than a week or two, in my opinion. They're on a lot shakier ground. They have to, I say that to say, they have to keep the populace pacified. And so these attacks that Iran knows that, Ted, that they've been doing on stuff like their oil fields and stuff like that. We saw the reaction from Saudi Arabia, and I'll turn it back to you. They turned around and asked President Trump to defer military action after that, not increase it.
Right. And again, they're in the neighborhood there. So, yeah, they're going to see things totally different and have a different perspective that we do. But you're right about Saudi Arabia. They're a country of 29 million people. 19 million are Arabs. The rest are, I believe it's Syria, Philippines, India, so it goes down. So they've got 9 million people or 10 million people that aren't Arab in their country. That, yeah, it's a very tenuous situation for them. And any uprising in Saudi Arabia will be dealt with harsh. Mark my words on that. So, yeah, they're in a tenuous situation. You're talking about Pakistan as the only nuclear weapon country. Dr. Khan, Abdul Khan, was the person that designed their nuclear weapons program and created and brought it to fruition. He's the same Dr. Khan that went to North Korea and shared that same information with him, Kim Jong Il, the father of Kim Jong Un. And so now they have a nuclear weapon. So, there's all these countries that are not aligned with America, and they're working with countries that are potentially adversarial. And so it's a dice game. It's, you've got to balance all these things. And there again, John, comes back to strong foreign policy with a clear objective that doesn't change from administration to administration. And these things need to be codified into law so we don't get this craziness we've seen in the last, probably since the Obama years.
Yeah, well, there's
and we got to thank Obama for that.
I hear you. There's also a message in this treaty, if you will, between these three nations, especially I think with Turkey and Saudi Arabia. There's a message to Iran because they don't like the Iranians. They don't trust the Iranians. But there's also a message to Israel in this as well, I think, because, yeah, they've been talking nicely and stuff like that. But there's a basic hatred and distrust Turkey and Israel and Saudi Arabia, even though they're talking very softly now about that, there's still a basic distrust. They're not fond of Israel.
They're not. They see Israel as Jewish versus Muslim. There's always been that conflict, and there'll probably always be that, unfortunately, because that's the way religious sects are. And when you look at that pact between Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Pakistan, I think they call it the Mecca Accord. That could be a very good thing. But Israel is the outlier. The one thing is, nobody likes Iran. And that's because 47 years of radical Shia Muslim extremism has affected all that region over there. And so Saudi Arabia could team up with Pakistan, Turkey, and even Israel to bring Iran under control. But will they do that is another thing, because if they do go back to Saudi Arabia, they've got 9 million people that aren't Sunni Arabs. and that would be a conflict in their country. So they've got to do a balancing act too. And this is where America, when we lost our leadership and our direction as a nation of what we stood for, it's upset this world apple cart. And you've heard me talk about when I was in Japan. They said that we are known as the divided states of America, not the United States of America. And this is one of the reasons, and this was under Biden, that Japan bumped up their military spending from 1%, I think it's over 2, maybe close to 5 now. And they moved from being, after World War II, strictly their military was used for humanitarian and defensive purposes. They've changed their constitution where they can do first strike capabilities if needed. And they see China as the biggest threat to them. And I know you're going to talk a minute and we're going to go into South Korea. So I'll use that as a segue if you're ready.
Absolutely. Because something that just happened over the weekend, President Trump ordered the Pentagon on Sunday to scale back the annual joint military exercises with South Korea. And this is basically what he said. He said the Allied declined talking about South Korea to help with the war against Iran. And he's also citing his good relationship with North Korea's Kim Jong-un. So well, I'll turn it back to you because, man, I'm perplexed about this. I think he's overstepping it. I think that I have to say I can't side with him on this, Ted, myself. And
I
let me
can't
get
either.
My thoughts together. Go ahead.
You might have to shake your head real hard and put it underwater until you black out and come up and see if it's changed. This is where I disagree with President Trump. As much as I like a lot of the things he did, closing the border, putting conservative justice, common sense justices on the Supreme Court, and we can go on and on. He's done great on that. But his foreign policy is a disaster. He had the love fest with Kim Jong-un. I commended him for trying to negotiate with Kim Jong-un on some kind of nuclear agreement. Kim Jong-un will never give up his nuclear weapons because they saw what happened to Gaddafi when he gave up his nuclear weapons. And Gaddafi didn't have the nuclear weapons, but when he disarmed, they destroyed him. Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama took out their no-fly zones, and the populace, tarred and feathered Gaddafi and killed him. And then you look at what Ukraine did. Ukraine was guaranteed that British and the United States would protect them if they gave up their nuclear weapons. Well, guess what? We didn't. And that's why Putin went in there. And so you had Trump with Kim Jong-un, and Trump won. It's going to be this big agreement, and Kim Jong-un kept firing, rockets and testing nuclear weapons. So it was kind of a slap in the face. And then the same thing with Trump and Putin. Oh, he's my friend. He's a good guy. And we'll work this out with Ukraine. And then he berates Zelensky, belittles him, and now he knows what a jerk and untrustworthy Putin is. And he's doing the same thing with Xi. And now it's like he's lost all of his credibility. So he's going back to Kim Jong-un saying, "Hey, you're a good guy. Will you like me? Please like me." And that's what I'm seeing. And I know that's going to make a lot of people mad. But by God, you got to have a strong policy, what America stands for, and you don't waver from it, and you apply it where you need to, and harshly if needed. And the goal is never to have to apply it. Walk softly, carry a big stick, and we have lost that, John. So this thing with Kim Jong-un is a distraction. You look at what he's done with Venezuela. We've taken out Maduro. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. But what's the aftermath? What's the aftermath of what's going to go on in Cuba? Cuba's armed up with over 300 drones. No telling what their goal is with that. I know it's not a good thing. And, I can go on and on and on about how we're not focusing on what China is doing. We're not focusing on our debt. We're not focusing on China and these other things that we need to focus on. And it's time for America to come together, and the politicians in DC need to push this agenda. And you look at all these Democrat socialists of America, they're being funded by China, Iran, Russia, the Soroses, all these radical groups that Roy Needham Singham in China. He's an American, but he's funding a lot of these radical groups like Code Pink. His wife's the founder of that. And it's all to cause dissent. And then you throw on all the money that went into the universities from Muslim countries, in Tennessee and all these other ones that are teaching a different ideology. It's not God, country, and family based on the founding of this principle. And the same thing with China, putting all that money into our educational system, and it goes into the liberal professors. They keep them in office, and they teach this garbage about how bad America is. And this is where we need to get back to this, and our politicians need to tighten up and get their head out of the where the sun doesn't shine and start putting America first here in a good way for generations to come. It's not for the now; it's for the survival of this nation.
Yeah, well, you mentioned about the president.
That's
there,
probably more than you wanted.
No, it's fine. So here's my thought on it. I kind of gathered my thoughts on this. I've been a big time supporter of Donald Trump way before he even ran for president, but certainly when he walked down the escalator, I was one of my first of my little group to come out and say that man needs to be president. And I'm still a supporter of the president, without a doubt. But I think because he needed to shake up D.C. and the world. And
He did.
NATO, I mean, I could go down a laundry list of things he's done great. The problem is that with Trump's ego, which he can't be who he is without that ego. You can't separate the two. He looks
Right.
at how America is treated as a reflection on them treating him that way. And I think he gets tied up in that because like the Korean situation is an excellent example. Do I agree with holding your enemies closer like Sun Tzu? Absolutely. Do I agree that he needs to be critical of our allies like NATO and all if they didn't help us? Yes. But to turn around and scale back that and at the same time supporting Kim Jong-un is not good for the United States of America in the long run.
It is not.
That's the way I see it. And I think it's a bruise to his ego. I'm still 100% supporter of President Trump, but I will question it where I see fit. And I think his ego gets bruised too easily, and it actually makes him less effective and harms America. I believe that.
Oh, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. You look at what he's doing, pulling out of the RIM Pact, and not the RIM Pact, but the cooperation we have with South Korea. That's not just South Korea; it's Australia and Japan. A lot in those military exercises that he wants to pull out or scale way back because he says South Korea's not doing enough for us in the Middle East. Can you blame them? They've got Kim Jong-un right north of them, and you've got China right there ready to pounce on them when the need comes. Keep in mind, Trump won. He was going to pull out of the South Korean free trade deal. It's called KORUS, KORUS. He was going to pull out of that. And that's where I got invited to the White House because I wrote a letter and asked him to respectfully reconsider that. South Korea is our sixth largest trading partner in the world. That happened because of the Marshall type plan that went in there after the Korean War. They provide us with, they're the largest producers of steel, stainless steel in the world. We get a lot of our steel from there. They're agreeing to build ships for us in South Korea. And then he wants to back off and get nice with Kim Jong-un. Again, he shouldn't be out there in the front negotiating that. That's why you've got diplomats. I was with him the first time, not with him personally, but I was supportive of him when he went and talked to Kim Jong-un the first time, away from the typical diplomats that we normally use and let the diplomats negotiate stuff, which has never worked. So I thought, yeah, it's a good way to shake it up. And you're absolutely right. Trump is the fruition, not the fruition, but the evolution of the descent in America that he came to power. He wasn't my first choice or second choice. He was my only choice when it was between him and Hillary Clinton. And he did need to go in there and shake it up. And it's been shaken up enough. Now it's time to let's get rid of the garbage and the broken pieces and let's fix it and build this country back strong as it needs to be and it should be and it can be. But we need I'm going to support him as much as I can through these last 2 years, and just hope that the aftermath is better than we ever thought, and I'll be forever thankful. I'll even be working on Mount Rushmore if they want to put his picture up there chiseling away.
I hear you. Well, with Korea, we talk about like people fleeing Cuba and which way did people run when the wall went down. When you start talking about socialism and communism, there's no better map, if you will, of the difference than looking at the Korean Peninsula at night from a satellite view because South Korea is lit up like no tomorrow. It looks like a fantasy land. North Korea is totally dark. And that tells you all you really need to know about socialism, communism, and the difference between lightness and darkness to me. There's no better example in the world. Well, you mentioned something about
It really
Cuba.
is, John. And
Go ahead.
hang on a minute. Let me go back to Korea. So Trump is trying to play nice with Kim Jong Un in North Korea. I don't mind anybody trying to make strong relationships, but keep in mind what North Korea is doing. They sent 10,000 soldiers to Russia to fight Ukraine. We have come around slowly and we're supporting Ukraine. He just announced Patriot missile productions that they can start doing that. And now Kim Jong Un, they have been sending weapons all along to Russia to fight Ukraine. Now they're going to send 50,000 soldiers there to fight against Ukraine. So you want to partner or get nice with a guy like that? And if it's all in the hopes of changing that and pulling those troops out, that's great. But I think this is just, I think he's just trying to find a friend out there, and it's not working. So
Yeah,
you're
well,
going to talk about Cuba.
yeah, well, you mentioned Ukraine and how it blends in with Cuba, and I'm hoping this doesn't happen. But you mentioned all of those drones. I want to play a video of how much drones are going to affect current wars and future wars. This is from Ukraine. They sent in some drones. This area is not far from Moscow, and it's basically a warehouse area. Think of it as Russia's version of Amazon, where they coordinate
Right.
materials of all kind and ship them out across the country. Look at this drone attack, and I think you could get the idea of what could happen, say, in South Florida. I'm hoping I'm wrong. Check this out.
I hope you're wrong too, buddy.
Well, there you go, Ted. You can see, and this is not like huge drones that look like jets. This is like swarms of drones, various kinds going in there and doing that level of damage. That is what is changing in the war, and Ukraine is actually leading the way a lot with our help. But it's frightening to say the least.
It really is. And I think this is a sign of times to come. You're going to see more conflicts in the future are going to be fought in this space. AI, drones, autonomous vehicles, autonomous submarines and missiles. You're going to see this so much more, and we're going to get away from the big platforms. There'll always be a need for, the F-35s and things like that. But we're building the stuff, spending all this money and technology, and China's stealing it and using that against us. Do you realize that in our military, on our latest Navy ships, there's over 6,500 chips to run that ship that come directly from China? It just and the Air Force just increased their purchases by 69% of products for the Air Force from China. It's just lunacy what we're doing, and we need to circle the wagons and make America strong and bring that production here.
Absolutely. Well, that's going to do it for our show today. We hope you like what we're doing. Share what we're doing far and wide. Make the call. Call Freddie. Become a part of our team. Help us keep the educating and motivating people. If you're in Florida, tomorrow is primary day. If you haven't already voted, I would encourage you to get out and vote. Take us out, Ted.
No, we need to celebrate uh, Fidel Castro's birthday. It's 100 years. And I say that um, sarcastically because the DSA, the Democrat Socialists of America, are celebrating Fidel Castro's. Not George Washington or any American president, but Fidel Castro because they want to be just like that. So a little worked up on this show. But you guys have a great Monday. And don't forget to visit our sponsor, Archer Automotive and Tire, a family owned automobile repair business, been in business for 20 years. All your gasoline and diesel powered equipment from the engine to the tailpipe, everything in between. And you can call them at 352-495-2485. Y'all go out and have a great day and spread the word, and don't forget to vote in the primaries. It's important.
Peace out, everybody.